this time to let you know that this panel discussion is being streamed on our Facebook page, the Barbados Olympic Association Inc., Olympic BB, and will be available for your viewing right after our discussion via our YouTube channel. This evening, we are extremely elated to be hosting this session, as we view this as an opportunity to celebrate our men and boys, as well as to promote sport and its role in the development of men and boys. My name is Ryan O'Brathwick, and I will be your moderator for this evening's discussion. But before we dive into our discussion, I would like to invite the Secretary General and Chair of the Sport for All Commission of the Barbados Olympic Association, Mr. Erskine Simmons, to say a few words. Mr. Simmons?
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Ryan, and thanks for that kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the President and the entire board of the Barbados Olympic Association, I would like to welcome all participants to this panel discussion, which forms part of the BOA's celebrations of International Men's Day. This is the first time that we are seeking to do such an event. This is the first time we're celebrating National Men's Day. And the whole concept of this falls within our mandate, which is the promote the Olympism, which seeks to create a way of life by blending sport with culture, education, and healthy living. National Men's Day was inaugurated in 1992. The objectives of which are set out in the 6 pillars is to recognize boys and men's achievements and their contribution to the nation, society, community, family, marriage, and of course, child care. As I indicated previously, it was inaugurated in 1992. It was actually inaugurated by a Trinidadian by the name of Jerome Tilak Singh, who revived the event and whose November 19th date that he chose is to honor his father's birthday. And it was also at that time that that date was used or was thought about in 1989 because it was synonymous with Trinidad and Tobago's effort to qualify for then the 1990 World Cup. And it brought the whole nation of Trinidad and Tobago together as they tried to that inform very important aspect of their sporting condition to celebrate their team's efforts to, and they did qualify for the World Cup in 1990. As I said earlier, indeed, my friends, National Men's Day is not just a gender day, but a day where all issues affecting men and boys are addressed. The BOA's initiative highlights the fact that our male community is also striving for gender equality in an attempt to remove the negative images and stigma that are associated with men in our society. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have with us a panel of quite a diverse group of individuals, which Ryan will introduce to you, spearheaded by Kenya Brathwaite, who has designed the program, including today's panel discussion, aimed at promoting partial improvements to the health and well-being of our male population. We welcome the public of Barbados and all those who are watching this webinar from wherever throughout the Caribbean and elsewhere, and in particular men and boys, who will find this inaugural initiative beneficial and interesting. Thank you very much, and I wish to hand over back to Ryan to start the webinar going. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simmons, and certainly some very fitting words for this evening's discussion. To introduce the panelists this evening, they're going to turn on their cameras very soon so you can see them, but certainly we have joined us for this exciting discussion Mr. Sean Simpson, who is a member of the BOA Athletes Commission, a national athlete, a coach in both volleyball and squash. We have also Mr. Darren Treasure, who's a sport administrator in the sport of triathlon and also coach as well. We have Mr. Roy Thompson, who is a social worker and policeman, and also Mr. Fabian Sargent, who is the founder of the Men's Empowerment Network. So certainly a very diverse group here with us this evening to help us unpack this evening's topic, which is looking at the role of sport in helping to preserve the mind, body, and will of men and boys. So before we get into the question and dialogue segment, I'm just going to ask each of the panelists to just introduce themselves and to give a very high level, brief as to who they are and the type of work that they're involved in. So I'll kick it off with Darren.
Hi, Ryan. Good evening. Thank you for that. Thanks for having me on tonight. My name is Darren Treasure. I'm the current president of the Barbados Federation of Island Triathletes, which is the National Federation for Triathlon in Barbados. Currently, I basically am working with a great team of volunteers within our federation to promote triathlon and develop both boys and girls, even though we're focused on men's and boys today. But I mean, triathlon is an all-inclusive sport, very gender equality driven, but we do tend to have more males in the sport at this time than females, but we're hoping that'll change. I'm involved from everything from strategic planning to coaching to development initiatives, organizing events in terms of our national championships and other events for basically adults and children. So I'm really just trying to cover off all the bases within our sport, and just trying to instill, I guess, the positive things that sports brings to children, whether it be triathlon or other sports. So I tend to have my fingers in a lot of the parts of the pie, and we work as a team within the federation to try to keep things moving forward.
Thank you very much, Darren. Fabian?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me as part of this discussion to celebrate International Men's Day, and happy International Men's Day to all you wonderful men. This is a day that we celebrate. Yes, this is a day that we celebrate men. This is a day that we celebrate our achievements and everything that is associated to men. So it's a pleasure to be here. A bit about myself, I'm a social worker. I also work at the Barbados Youth Advanced Score as Program Officer with responsibility for the personal development programs. I'm also the founder and president of Men Empowerment Network Support, which is an organization that pretty much facilitate men in a supportive way. Our focus really is towards empowering men as it relates to their emotional intelligence. We have our flagship program, which is Men Talk, where we allow men to just come out and share in a very structured, confidential, and safe space, a space where men can be men among men and just talk about anything that is manly. I'm also, thanks we are speaking of sports, I hardly ever speak about this, but I'm also I have been practicing jiu-jitsu for like the past probably 16 years. My club regional organization of combat karate. So I do have some experience, well, a lot of experience because we have toured regionally. We've been involved in many tournaments. I'm actually one of the instructors as well. So I definitely get to influence the lives of young people and older people as well through my martial arts skills, along with my professional skills. So I'm looking forward to a good discussion.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Fabian. And certainly we will be learning on some of that expertise to help in our discussion this evening. Sean?
Hey, good night. I'm Sean Simpson. As Ryan indicated, I am a dual national athlete in both squash and volleyball. I've been playing squash for about 27 years, volleyball just about 20, and I am a full-time squash coach right now. I was in the finance field for a number of years before I came over to doing squash as a coach for the last 2 years, and I can say that definitely it's been an enjoyable time since making that transition. And I also just came on board as the president of the Barbados Squash Club in June. So both as a coach now and as an administrator leading an organization from that aspect. And of course, being an athlete at the highest level playing Commonwealth Games, CAC Games, Pan Am Games over the last few years as well. And I'm looking forward to the discussions for today and see what we can dive into. One of the things that is often said is men don't get the chance to really express themselves. It's always seen that we're always seen as macho, and the less said, the better. So I'm looking forward to today's discussions.
Thank you very much, Sean. And finally, we have Roy. Roy, can you hear us?
Yes, unmute.
There you go.
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, I'm Sergeant Thompson, and my area of work is community officer work and specialize mostly in the area of empowerment in terms of the youth, working with Cub Scouts, Brownies, cadets, working in the schools, dealing with delinquency, counseling, empowering and enhancing the roles that youth would normally perform in the school, in home, and in the community. And duties basically spread a little wider in terms of looking at the elderly and looking at communities and crime prevention. And that's a year of my work.
Yes, thank you very much, Roy, and certainly thank you for everyone for introducing themselves. So the International Men's Day movement states that men face a series of health challenges that need to be addressed in order to have our communities function to their fullest potential. The current research tells us that men have a suicide rate 3 times higher than women. 1 in 3 men having victims of domestic violence. Men on average die, 4 to 5 years before women. Men are nearly twice as likely to suffer from lung cancer than women. Men are nearly twice as likely to suffer from heart disease than women. And basically just, what I'm coming out here now, Tim, is this whole cliche statement that men basically are in crisis. And I want to throw this first question out to the panelists and to ask, I'm being some of these startling statistics. Why do you think that's the case? And why is it that, men are seen to have all these challenges? Fabian, I'll kick off with you.
Well, I really don't go with the whole statement that men are in crisis. I mean, men are who we are in terms of our biological makeup. What I will tell you is that we have our differences when compared to our female counterparts, and I think these differences lean more towards our cultural experience, where we as men are socialized in a particular way that pretty much creates an individual that doesn't really communicate. We are not allowed to express ourselves from early. We are not allowed to show signs of pain. We are not allowed to be overtly expressive. If you do that, that is not something that's in man. So we are fed this whole type of experience that creates a false image of what a man should be. And then we have to look at the environment that we are raised in, the expectations that our superiors or our parents or family, and I say superiors because I just want to link, because although we look at the household as the primary space for socializing as it relates to a child, you have to look at the entire community, schools, churches, and put everything together, all these different systems that are instrumental in shaping a man. So all of these experiences put together can create an individual where we tend to not really pay a lot of attention to our health because we're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to be macho, so you're not supposed to feel pain. And then there's the whole, I like to look at what you consider the soft skills, the lack of communication, how we relate to each other, how we relate to our peers. Then we have in recent times more so the social media, so we have many external influences that shape our realities and how we treat to our illnesses, how we treat to our mental state, and that is a very big one of mine. I hope that as we continue this discussion, we focus on that component, the mental health of men, because I think that that is often neglected. So I'll pause there for now. Yeah.
Yeah, well, coming off of that, I'm certainly going to get Sean's perspective as well too as an athlete, and certainly we're going to talk a bit more about sport and that role a little later on. But I certainly want to get Sean's perspective as well. And do you think men are in crisis? What are your takes on it?
I would agree with what Fabian said. It's a lot of macho, or we're not supposed to discuss certain things. And even in, let's say, in my circle of friends, one of the things that's funny is that we have discussions on a daily basis in our chats, and there are probably maybe like two or three guys that on a daily basis are roasted. Like we would roast each other, and it's funny, but then it's not funny because you're also thinking, well, at some point, is this guy gonna crack or not? And and one of the things that we always say is, don't take it the wrong way. We just making fun, but sometimes you don't know what somebody's going through, and the message you may send to them on that particular day may not be in the best interest of them. But at the end of the day, all of us, we do care about each other, and I think it boils back down to how you interact with others, and just making sure that you always think, do you want that person to do the same thing to you, even if you're making fun. Some days I may have a bad day, and then you're all of a sudden attacked in out of the blue, and you're like, well, where did this come from? But I also have to remember, look, Sean, you stepped into some mess, so just back out of that and gather yourself. So it's a lot of constant battling on a daily basis, I would say, that men have to deal with, and it's just, as you said, communication. How do we communicate with each other, and what is acceptable and what isn't?
Awesome. Thanks for that. Roy, just turn over to you from your expertise and being on the ground in the communities and such. Like, what is your take on this whole idea of men not being able to express themselves and the challenges that men are facing? What is the sense and the feeling that you get well out there?
Well, men do express themselves, but I think it's the way in which they express themselves. And the more important thing that we should really focus on is those values and norms that you see within the home that are being brought down or being spoken to the youth, primarily men that we speak about, right? And I think Fabian spoke about that, those external influences that you would get from within the environment, whether it is at home, whether it's at school, within the community. And then I think Sean too, he spoke about the interaction that you get from persons. So it's very important that you instill those positive values and norms that will help shape men from a young age. And as you develop to adult, you will be able to carry on with those values and norms that that will be more positive and create a whole positive image. And is from a personal experience, in terms of what I experienced as a child from my parents, those values, whether it's Christian values, that you get from your parents, instilling those values that help to shape you as an individual. And then values that you learn from in school, simple things like respect for persons, regardless if they are persons that strangers, adults telling you things as you listen to what's being said so you can do the right thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I think you've touched on some really key points. I've made a couple notes on some things I want to pick back up on a bit as we go in the discussion. But I want to get Darren into this conversation as well in terms of the challenges men face. But now also too, we've touched on values. We touched on the whole idea of instilling, the fact that is how we communicate and what's being taught at home. From the sport perspective, do you find that there are, so I wanted some experiences that you can share with some of the athletes. I mean, you said your sport is predominantly heavily men based and boys based. What are some of these vibes and the things you're getting from your sport as it relates to men and boys in your sport?
Well, I think what I see in triathlon is a strong drive to succeed. So I definitely would see men and boys being more competitive than their female counterparts in that respect. There seems to, even in a training environment, there's always kind of an element of competition in that, which can be healthy, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But I think that's, to stereotype men, maybe that's a little bit more of their nature in terms of being more competitive with each other. So that's definitely something we see. Again, with the boys, and as some of the panelists rightly said, the influences that they have externally can play a large part in how they act within a sport or participate within a sport as well. So, I see it as, sport is a way to teach people good values and teach them respect and teach them, how to work hard and how to play fair, right? So, basically as a administrator or a coach, I see it as it's our duty to work with these young men, if you will, or boys or kids, and really teach them the values and instill the values, positive values that will turn them into better people, not just better athletes. So that's how I view the sport, and how when we have young men or women or even boys, I should say, come to into our sport, I see it more than just us teaching them how to be an athlete. It's how to become a better person overall, and I'd rather see them become a successful person than a successful athlete, really, at the end of the day. I mean, very few boys will turn into Olympians. That's just the reality of it. I mean, everybody, if they have that aspiration, should follow it and should do whatever they can to try to achieve it. But, the hard reality is not everybody is an elite athlete. So, at the end of the day, we have to encourage kids to stay in sport, and just be comfortable in their own abilities. So, there's nothing wrong with being someone who's in the sport and enjoys it for just the social aspect, or they just, like the exercise component of it. Maybe they don't like to compete. So it's really just trying to be all inclusive and support them in whatever positive feelings they're getting out of that activity, and really just, nurture that. And again, just, maybe their contribution will come in the way of coaching as an adult, or maybe it'll be as a technical official, right? So not everybody that comes into the sport is going to maybe be that athlete that gets you to the higher games or whatever. But, everyone deserves the opportunity. And if they are driven to do it, then, it's also our role to help them with that opportunity and get them on the right pathway as well.
Yes, some very salient points as well that you've touched on, Darren. And I want to just go back a little bit to some of the points that were mentioned early. And so let's say we can unpack this way. There's socialization of men and boys. And I know Fabian touched on that, we're socialized in a particular way, the way of not being overly expressive and those types of perceptions that are out there. And the question I want to throw there to Sean is, and Darren started introduce why the sport playing that role in terms of helping to present certain values. But I want to get a sense as to, as an athlete in sport and growing up, what has been some of your challenges that you faced, and certainly that whole idea of being asked to be a certain way. What has those experiences been like for you?
All right. I started playing squash at 9, and started to go through puberty. You became interested in girls. You obviously, and then you're trying to navigate that whole life of growing up. You're starting to get chest hair. You're starting to get facial hair. You're starting to talk to girls. You also have to worry about school. Your parents making sure that you do what you need to do in school, and you still have to prepare mentally and physically for sports. And the challenges there, it became such a balancing act, knowing when to switch on and switch off certain parts of your life. And as an athlete, you know, talking just as an athlete, the expectations I put on myself um, on a yearly basis, you're saying, okay, look, this is where I'm at this year. I need to do better next year, or I may need to do better in a future tournament later down in the same year. And sometimes you may not have hit those targets, and then you're disappointed. You may have lost a tournament that you were really looking to win. And I mean, sometimes I would go into a corner and just shut down, you know, and I would try to process in my own space what happened, what did I do wrong, what did I do right, how could I improve, and go from there. And I mean, thankfully, like my dad is a squash player as well. So there were many times that he would come to me after the match, and obviously after a little bit of time, and then he would say, well, young boy, you didn't do this or you didn't do that, but you still played well, or something like that. You get those encouraging words from somebody that you look up to as an individual, and then everything, that weight on your shoulders would just kind of disappear. You're like, okay, at least somebody else out there, thought that your effort was still good enough, even though you didn't do as you expected. And obviously on the high level, whenever I won, you know, especially when I won national titles. When I grew up as a junior, I never won a junior national title. It was only when I got to seniors that I started to win a national title. And all of those pains and tribulations and going through that, and you're like, will I ever succeed? And the first one I won, I was so ecstatic, and I thank my dad and my mom, because they were the ones who were along the way, just continuing to push me, continuing to support me, and say, Sean, your time will come.
Do it.
And it happened, and
Yeah.
you had to put in the hard work. You had to take the knocks against your chin, and just get back up, and like I said, it's just those little challenges of how to navigate life, and the external factors, as I said, like school, girls, your friends, family life as well. So that would be kind of like what I went through from a young age right up to now, basically.
But you touched on a very one of the key points that are certainly going to come out from the one of the things I want to touch on shortly is that whole idea of having support systems and persons that you could have relied on. I want to get Fabian jumping here as well, because I know from his background, from the work that he's doing, there may be some boys who may not necessarily have that opportunity. And Fabian, can you weigh here in terms of what are some of the experiences that before we jump on the call, you were going to share some experiences that you encountered as well. And I want you to weigh in here as well, because that whole idea of boys being able to share, you mentioned earlier. What do you think is so important, and what happens then when boys don't have that avenue? What happens? So I want you to give some thoughts on that.
So let me start at the last thing first. What happens when you allow stuff to build up inside? It becomes like a balloon. You blow up and blow up, and eventually at some point you will explode. It is the explosion that we are fearful of. How that will look like, where that would be, who it would be with, and so that is where the concern really lies. Sometimes you see these guys explode in some real serious situations where that result in some serious violence, and all that is just all of the frustration over a long period of time that's just built up, and then they finally get that avenue. They finally feel the power to just let go, and it puts them in a very bad situation. Now, you ask them about the work that I do and where these young people would go. Now, that is where sports come into play, and it is so important that we look at the real realities and the benefits of sports. Now, there are many youngsters out there who lack father figures, who does not have men in the household, and getting involved in sports where they're able to see senior players, they're able to see senior men, they're able to see a coach, they're able to see other persons that are part of the team, how they respond to negative situations, how they balance their own emotions. We are individuals that learn more from what we see, more so than what we are told. So a guy will be part of a team, and how his coach handles a situation, he would probably, at some point in time in his life, he more or less will become a coach, and he will probably pick up a lot of those same characteristics, those same traits that his coach would have had, whether it be shouting, whether it be having a short temper. All of these are things that young players will pick up. So it is up now. It's up to the seniors, the coaches, and so forth to provide that role model figure, to provide that positive type of energy that they would want to see their players having. I heard Sean spoke about not winning a title in juniors, but as he got to senior, and even when he lose a title, he felt, and the word he used, he said he would go in a corner and shut down. Okay. Now for him, he would shut down, but when he shut down, he had a sense of support, because then there was daddy to give him that support. There are many youngsters who do not have that support. Okay. And that is where a lot of the emotional intelligence have to come into play, where we as men get to understand that, okay, sometimes you really, really want to win, but sometimes life is such that you don't always get what you want, but it does not mean that you are a loser. So it is about absorbing the same skills that you get from playing a sport into your personal life, whether it be within parenting, relationships, whatever. And I can see there is a real close relationship between how persons who are involved in sports in a major way, how they relate to their general life, because you learn team spirit. As men grow up, most men, they get involved in intimate relationships. You develop a team. Okay, your spouse becomes your team. There's communication within the team. How do you communicate? Self-esteem, active listening, all of what you consider the soft skills. Sports help men develop, and it provides that support that they would not ordinarily have in their household. They would not ordinarily have because of a lack of parental involvement. I remember, not in a bad way. I think it was more scared. When I was like 13 years old, I wanted to start karate. My mother was so fearful of me. I remember, she told me, I ain't coming to none of your tournaments, I ain't support her. I used to feel real bad because I really wanted to have my mother there. It's only when I get an adult, she can't tell me what to do no more. And I invited her to a tournament that I participated in, and she come through the door with she eyes closed. I remember when I got in the ring to fight, But I'm saying the feeling that she was there, and I won. So even the fact that she was there, that felt that made a difference. So it's really important that youngsters really have that support, if not from their parents, at least from teammates, at least from coaches, and that these individuals develop or pretty much put over a type of personality that these young people, this positive type of personality that these youngsters can pull on.
Absolutely, yes. Very good and key points there. Looking at the value of sport, the value of role models. I know that Sean would have weighed into it early as well. I want to, and to the panelists as well. Feel free to at any point in time, ask any questions that you want of each other as well, so we can get the conversation going as well. But I want to get Roy here in on the discussion as well, and to get your perspective as well on the role, the value of a role model and a male figure and a man in terms of helping boys in their development. And I know Fabian just touched on it in terms of sport and the role coaches and male coaches can play in helping to empower boys in sport. But I want from your perspective in terms of the wider context, can you give us your thoughts on that as well?
Yes, I think some of what was mentioned too, that your role that you play to as a father figure, your character that you have also helps to shape those individuals, because in terms of your role that you play, and whatever aspect. Like for me, whenever like I working with the Cub Scouts and stuff, I did the water sports badge, or the bicycle badge, road safety. What we normally do, I actually do the actual activity. So they get experience that they can, work as a team, and teamwork helps to promote, responsibility. Each individual has a role to play, and that gives you ownership and feeling of a part of. And sometimes that is what, the young people need to ownership, to feel a part of something that they are doing, not just sitting on and observing, but to play a role as well. And it is even better, when everybody else helps to achieve that particular goal as a team. So for me, I like to promote teamwork. And, with the whole aspect of sports, it helps to improve your physical health, get better cognitive functioning, persons develop a high self-esteem, they're going to get issues like, with depression. One thing that Fabian mentioned too, yes, you play these sports, but then, say for instance, if you get in a dispute or something like that, how you handle that dispute. So effort needs to be paid to in terms of how you deal with conflict, how you resolve conflict. So that's very important as well, right? But the sports help to develop, teamwork and those skills in terms of physicalness and how you deal with things on a cognitive level in terms of your functioning with other persons as well, right? But the important thing is that role that you play, and they're able to model the role that you see persons behave into as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Darren, I want to turn over to you and thanks for sharing those insights. I think that they're really important, and certainly I grew up playing sport as well, a volleyballer, and certainly I understand and I've transitioned completely now into sport administration as a profession. And a lot of the points that you have articulated earlier, I can certainly relate to as well because, I was part of a team and I understand the value of, respect for my teammates as a young man growing up. As you rightly said earlier, sometimes you lose, but certainly, it's not the end all, it's not the end. You have to get back up and go again, and you can't revert to violence or whatever the case may be. So certainly, I can see and can certainly be a personal testimony for myself too as an athlete growing up, and still being in the other aspect as well. That it certainly has some tremendous benefits to the development of an individual and to me as a male as well. So I want to weigh in Darren here on and to go back a bit to the whole idea of our topic. And it says, we're looking at the whole idea of the role of sport in preserving the mind, body, and will of men and boys. And I want to pick this down into, different sections. We're talking about the mind first. And I know we touched on the whole emotions and men, and boys being taught to keep their emotions in and to, not really express themselves. But, and now we have this whole idea of the global pandemic. COVID-19 has stepped in and has changed the whole sporting landscape. It has, reduced the ability for persons to take part in sport. So it has really had, and even there's been certainly created a tremendous impact on our society at a number of different levels. So from you, Darren, how do you think sport has, the COVID-19 story has affected our men and boys in sport today? Have you seen any, any trends, any things that are sort of made a concern? What do you think can be done, one, and what are some of the things you've seen?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there's no question that COVID presented a very significant challenge to the athlete. And, if we were focusing on the mind only, not to mention the body in terms of what that would have done in terms of not being able to do your sport, the mental aspect of that challenge was probably even greater in terms of athletes having to cope with not having their daily routine, not getting that, adrenaline of being active and being in the sport. So, that definitely presented a problem. Barbados was very fortunate that, we were able to resume some element of physical activity early on compared to the rest of the world. Our sport in particular, we're one of the few countries in the Caribbean, if not the world, that were able to put on a national triathlon championship. I mean, yes, and COVID impacted how we put on that event and everything as well. But again, that event to us, or having those events available to our athletes, to me, gives their mind some peace that, this is normal. Roy mentioned, like dealing with depression, dealing with stress, like those are things that COVID would have really accentuated or magnified for an athlete who's so used to, their sport is ingrained in their way of life, right? So it's when you take that away, part of them is now missing. So, that in terms of the mind is very important. And, they're now, I'm reading and seeing studies where, they are starting to study these athletes and trying to understand, what exactly happened to them mentally by not being able to compete. The depression is obviously one of the side effects. It doesn't get as far as like suicidal thoughts, right? I mean, how deep can that go? Like, if you feel now that your value or your worth has been taken away, you can just go into like a downward spiral, right? And not come out of it unless you have good people around you and can kind of bring you up out of it. If you're someone who's just so driven and you can't see the bigger picture, that eventually things will ease off and things will go back to normal. And think about the Olympians who had put in all that work, right? And to have those games pushed back, now a lot of them aren't even sure what their qualification process is, when they're going to start back. How do you train when you don't know what you're training for, right? Or when you're supposed to be peaking? So there's a lot of uncertainty now in athletes' minds, driven by COVID and the impacts it's had. So the athletes have really had to deal with a lot in this particular year, and we're not through it yet, but things are starting to work through. Yeah, it's sport when it comes back, is just like a breath of fresh air, really. What we saw during COVID with triathlon, like people would run 5K around their house. Like they wanted that exercise so badly, so we started a 5K challenge, and it was running however big your property was. You just ran around it until you hit 5 kilometers, and people were doing it in their driveway. People were starved, and people were figuring out ways to get like basically big stretch cords or surgical cords and tie them to their waist and swim in the smallest pool they can get their hands on, and just try to swim in it like in place in one spot, and having this stretch cord pulling them back all the time. So it did cause athletes to become a little more creative. Triathletes, if they're lucky, they may have access to a treadmill, or maybe they had access to a stationary bike machine where they could cycle indoors. But there's a lot of sports, team sports, for instance. I can't imagine if you were a team sport and that sport was taken away, like how you coped. I guess you could work on your skills at home maybe and do something like that. But there's no question that COVID presented a new set of challenges for athletes that they never would have faced. And athletes will be stronger coming out of it. I mean, they're gonna have gone through a very tough time, probably nothing they'll ever experience like it again, and they'll have a better coping mechanism for challenges they face down the road.
Yeah, thank you, Darren, as well, for sharing some practical tips. And certainly we see correlation as well with the mind as well as the body, because we understand that when your mind is in a bad place, sometimes that exercise and that adrenaline helps to put in a whole different space. So Fabian, I know before the call too, we were briefly touched on that as well. What was your take on it too as well, in terms of the impact of COVID to affect how it's affected our men, our boys, the lockdowns, that inability to get out, and we're more active beings. What are your perspectives on that?
Frustrating. It has been I know it has been a frustrating experience for many youngsters to see sports, particularly football, which is very big in Barbados, at the community level, is an avenue for boys particularly to get out, to get away from home, to get away from that stress from mommy quarreling and the family miserable, and to get your own space to really socialize. And the fact that has been limited, that has been a very, very I should say, dampening our situation to many youngsters, and not being able to pretty much put that energy in another place. Sometimes young people have so much energy. I mean, in this particular instance, I'm speaking about adolescents, but I have two young sons, 3 and 10 years old. And if I don't carry the 3-year-old outside to burn off his energy, I am telling you, the whole house upside down. So young people, I mean, the whole house, he get terrorized. So they got to take him outside the bicycle and just let him go up and down till he gets tired. And that is only 3. So you can imagine as you grow older, your endurance level is increased. A lot of these young boys, and they'll need a place to let off. And not only that, because a lot of these young boys are very sexual. I wanted to
But
really
is
hit
that,
the
is
issue.
that, is that, and sorry to cut you, but is that a physical characteristic that, or that is something that we were socialized to
Is that the
believe, or
energy? You mean that boys have a lot of energy?
yeah, is it more here? Is that something that's been socialized, or is it a fact?
I think that is more biological. I mean, in terms of the testosterone and all the natural hormones and so forth that men emit, that helps to drive that, where we are a lot more physically oriented, even in terms of our muscle structure and our build, our brain composition. Men thrive on competition. Men like to know that they are doing something and that they're engaged. They're burning off that energy. If they don't get to burn it in a positive way, they will do it in a negative way. And I mean, you cut me just now when I was going to hit that shot, because he spoke about going through his adolescent phase and all the different I don't want to say obstacles, but challenges that he probably faced. But a lot of young boys face a lot of sexual challenges as well, and not being able to. I mean, they're very sexual. They can masturbate. If not, they can have sex with some young girl or something. And if they don't really get opportunities to really explore the bodies, explore themselves, burn off all this energy, I am telling you, a lot of that energy will be then targeted in a negative direction. And sports play a real pivotal role in the psychosocial development of society. And as I said, boys usually use it as a way to get out. You just see boys on the pass the whole day. You want of it. These men play football from morning to night. I mean, and that is their space. That is their space where they feel accepted, they feel loved, where they can laugh, where they can make sport, and they can be boys amongst themselves. I mean, sometimes the conversations are not the most healthy, and that is why I would really like to push. I mean, as we look at sports in a more structured way, I would like to see that a lot of the structured organizations build in a strong psychosocial component where athletes now go through that group counseling or individual counseling and are taught that it starts with the mind. While you may be physically strong, while you may have the talent, if you are not mentally strong, if you're not focused, if you're not able to deal with those emotions and balance them, you may go to play a particular sport and a man whisper something in your ears just to offset you. What are you going to do? Are you going to be offset for the rest? Are your best man on your team, the other team plotting for you? So they ease up and they're gonna tell you, say, in your ear, there's a beer, whoever, and he offset because he don't know how to deal with that. He don't know how to shut that off. He don't know how to say, well, look,
I think we just lost a Fabian there, but
I come
okay.
with you, So sports play a critical role.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I absolutely agree with that. And I wanted to continue looking at that last point you made, because the psychology is very, very important, because if you're not trained up here the right way, sometimes that can trigger you in so many other ways. And I want to ask Roy a question, because we touched on the whole idea of role models, but I want to dive in it a little more, because we say that do you believe there's a sufficient example of role models out there for our boys, in terms of men, and are they really setting the sort of examples that we want them to set?
We can say there are role models out there for young men to follow, but you know, is if they are following the models, the role models that you expect them to be following, right? And I think that's
That's a good point. Yeah.
what you're really, you know, pondering on, you know, and then you need to get them focused on those models that you want to you know, follow or pattern their life after, you know. And I guess the key is to get those persons out there more in the eye of persons, because one of the things that I found was that, you know, if you spend this 20 minutes in a person's life with positive, and then, you know, the rest, you know, is more negative, that will have the negative will have a more stronger influence than the positive. But the key is to get the more positive more out there playing a more active role in the youth at this point, right? I know with, like, especially like in my area, schools. So, you know, the emphasis now is on social distance. So, and a lot of the after school activities now, you know, has been postponed until, right? And one of the things I found was that, you know, like for instance, sports or any other extracurricular activities will allow, you know, boys especially to be more free spirited and more active and have an environment that they're more expressive. So I guess, you know, when, you know, more activities are able to be performed, then you would, you know, you will get back into that more expressive element.
Yep. I absolutely agree with you. What is your take on it, Sean, as well? The importance of role model. When you look at some of your peers as well, you know, what are some of the things that they relate to with respect to role models, and do they have sufficient people there to help shape them and guide them? And why is that? If they do, what are some of the things that they're saying?
I could say I agree with Roy and with respect that there are role models out there, but do we have good role models or the right role models? Um, I like for my one bit, I had a good support system, not just my dad and my mom, but also my family. You know, we're we're a very close family, and everybody would check in on each other, and also making sure that uh, you know, you had good discipline and values instilled in you from a young age. And then having to jump out of that situation, and then you're coming into schools and picking up friends and people coming from different backgrounds, and just having to understand, okay, look, not everybody is going to be experiencing the same situation. Some persons come from harder households where they may not even know how to purchase lunch. They didn't have money to purchase lunch. They barely had enough um, rest the night in front to wake up the next day to come to school. Some persons may want to participate in a sport, but they didn't have a pair of shoes. Um, and I saw those kind of things when I was growing up, and not only at secondary school, but from primary school. And it, you know, those kind of things I had to understand and say, you know, Sean, you have to be very thankful for what you have. And that was one of the things my dad always used to say. He said, you know, like, Sean, do you really need this, or do you want this? And at a young age, you're going through that and saying, well, daddy, I want this. I don't know why you telling me no. And and then he's saying, I need you to understand, do you want this or do you need this? And it's only when I got in my latter stages of teen years that I understood what he was saying. And it was teaching you to value value things in life, and being able to and those kind of things shaped me in being able to move from within different circles, and knowing, okay, look, you know, you need to treat everybody the same as you will want to be treated, and you need to be sensitive with certain things that you say and do. And even though today, like, even with my friends, we would say, okay, look, you know, we have role models, and some of my friends will even say, "My Sean, you know, I'm so proud of you. Like, you're the one person that's still going on, and you still." They want to know how I'm still doing it, even at my age. You know, they're like, how do you find time to play squash? How do you find time to play volleyball? How do you find time to coach? How do you then still find time to train outside of that? You know, how do you find time for us? How do you find time for family? How do you find time for going out and having a good time? And I said to them, you know, it's all about that same time management that I was able to build upon as a young person, and saying, okay, look, this is what I
And
need
a
to
sports
do.
person as that too as well.
Yeah, as a sports thing, right? And and they were all, you know, some of my friends were saying, "Man, Sean, you know, like I'm really proud of you." So like the other day when I remember when I went to CAC games in 2006, and I think at those games I was probably the first person in the history of the games that played two sports at the same time, and and because I went and played squash, then played volleyball, and my friends, they were like, "Man, Sean, that has to be, you have to feel so good knowing that coming from a small island that you're able to do that." And luckily at those games, squash, we medaled for the first time, and I was part of the men's doubles team that got the first medal for squash, and that in itself was obviously a major accomplishment. And of it, like my dad, he was there, he was the manager of the team, and just having again know that sense of that person that was always there for any time you knew yourself, and just seeing the smile on his face, and he was just like, yes, you know, we did it. And and like for me, my dad is my role model, and I know I don't tell him that. I know he's in here on the panel, but he is my role model, and I try to, you know, I try to take the values that he put in me, and I use in my life now today as a coach, because I also interact with men. I'm trying to build them along the ways that my dad would have used on me, and just trying to instill in them the good morals, good the good thought process, and making them to understand, you know, everything happens in due course, and as long as you put in the work and you understand that it's a process, and nothing happens until it's the right time. And just trying to encourage them, and let them know, look, you know, if you ever feel like you need to talk to somebody, you know, you could talk to Uncle John. You know, don't feel like that there's no one out there that's willing to listen to you. And I said, I was a teenager once. I know things may be done slightly different, but the thought process is still the same. I know there's TikTok, I know there's Snapchat, and those kind of things that catch their interest. But I was always tell them, you know, if you're going through any difficulties, if there's
I'm
something
headed
that's
to
on
what
your mind.
discussion was going to raise about the whole idea of social media and throw it out there back to the, you know, to you guys in terms of, you know, how social media is impacting the society as well, and the role that has also played in terms of, you know, young people and boys and their development, and because we spend so much time on our devices. So, you know, you're touching on a point there in terms of sometimes we even live our lives through our phones, and then we communicate this way, but sometimes we need that interact, that face-to-face interaction too, because we can't necessarily live our lives on devices. But
It's true.
before we still need that word of encouragement. But before we touch on that, before we conclude, because time seems to be running away really quickly when we're getting into discussion, I want to ask Darren, and bring Darren and Fabian and Roy back in this mix about the whole role of institutions, because we talk about role models as, the father figure being there, a coach or uncle or somebody who's there to help, you know, mentor and to provide that support system for boys. But what about institutions as well? The role they also have to play at that level in terms of the development of our men and our boys. And I'm also going to even weigh a little bit on the sporting institutions as well, because we are a sporting institution. What sort of role do you see that they have to play into helping to develop our boys and our men?
After Roy, you want to go ahead and take that first?
All right, no problem. I think one of the things that, persons that, that playing roles, what they should do is help to point out some of the, the strengths that individuals will have, also the weaknesses, so that they can help to enhance those weaknesses, right? I think that's very important, right? As especially from a young age, like for me, my experience, my dad, he always used to point out my strengths, whether it's, sports, academics, whatever, point out those strengths, and that helps to give me, the insight of, my direction of where to go. I think that's very important when you highlight, the strengths of individuals and even the weaknesses, so you can work on those weaknesses as well, and also try to promote self-evaluation, evaluating self. Where are you at? Where you like to go? How would you be able to achieve your goals to get to that point that you would like to see yourself at, to be a level that you could see high performance and stuff like that, right? So it's all about trying to help them to do self-introspection, and so they can look at, in a deep way, all right, yeah, this is the sport I want to play. What are some of the things they need to improve on? Having those individuals also in place to help point to get them to that level. And when I think it was Sean, when he was speaking, and speaking of his own personal experience, what came to mind too, sometimes lack of equality. He might have individuals within his family or social network that will be able to push him, try to create environments where you can have, some positive aspects being portrayed to those individuals as well. And, finding ways that you can afford opportunity for those persons too as well, that would need that extra help and support, to get them to that point or level that they should be at as well.
Awesome. And I think the last point you were touching on was what the things that institutions can do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. What about your Fabian, Darren?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's different types of institutions that can play a role in sport and developing sport, I guess, for young boys and men. I guess at one time, this probably precedes me, there was a YMCA here in Barbados, right? And I've seen articles that appear in the newspaper every now and then about trying to revive it. Like, to me, growing up in Canada, like, YMCAs were quite common, and it was a place where people would congregate and sport would take place. And again, it was that institution that kind of promoted and developed sport, at least maybe from an introductory point of view. I mean, the schools are institutions that are playing a very critical role in offering certain sports and teaching sport to young Barbadian men and boys of all ages. So again, and the schools are providing those competitions at a greater level too, that allow them to compete and kind of measure their skill against other children at school as well. So that's a pretty important role I see. Other institutions, if you want to kind of classify them as that, things like Boy Scouts are good. Like, all those kind of community-based type institutions that are really teaching good values. Again, the Boy Scouts may not be all about sports, but sports could be part of it, or some of the values are similar to what they're trying to teach, right? And how to deal with other people and the teamwork that's involved. I guess here we have, in terms of other institutions, like UE is obviously catering to an older demographic, but I mean, now you're talking more advanced knowledge about sport, whether it's theoretical versus the practical side of things. And obviously they have good facilities up there as well, so that allows older young adults or teenagers to continue in sport, because that's another thing in Barbados you see is a pretty high drop-off rate at some points once they kind of don't have the avenue to pursue their sport anymore, or school takes precedent over sport. So it's nice to have an institution where you can do both, right? So in terms of UE offering sports as well as academics, that's important to have. So caters to all the different demographics and ages of men in Barbados. So just having that avenue there is useful.
Yes, and for me, as it relates to you asked about institutions, so I will go straight to policy. because institutions are run by management, and if there is not the buy-in from management, whether it be in schools or otherwise, where people see sports as more than just or a few people just running around a field behind a ball or whatever the case is, there needs to be a level of buy-in if these sports are to really grow, and if something meaningful is to come out of them. I think also that these individuals, and I speak again to management, should see sports in a more capacity building and personal development type of situation versus just running around. Once we can have that happening, once we can have buy-in from management, then I believe that the infrastructure that they put in place would be more warming and more inviting, and more conducive for development for a lot of these young boys, particularly who they say are in crisis. And I would also add, while we usually speak of what I consider the traditional sports, I really can't leave here without mentioning one of my pet peeves. I really think that we need to start exploring what I consider the unorthodox type of sports, because a lot of the men on the block into bike racing, the into stunt riding, whether it be bicycles, motorcycles, and I think even that alone, while it may not be what we consider a traditional type of sport, I think that is an area where these men take their energy and exert this energy on the bikes, and I mean, and they're very, very talented. And I
You
think
have to
that
go to tap in them where they're at and find a space to connect with them.
exactly tap into them and use that, because they're taking that negative. If you check the guys that they say that created the challenges on the blocks and whatever, a lot of these men are interested in bikes and so forth, and you want to be able to channel that energy into a positive area, as Roy would have mentioned, building on their strengths. And if their strengths are bike riding, that's what I like doing. I'll get them a little space and let them bike ride, if they like a BMX stunt riding, do that and invest in it. Invest in the young people. We are a society that is evolving. The needs of young people are evolving. But if the heads that make the decisions do not evolve, young people are going to feel stuck and feel as if they're boxed in, because they're not being able to explore their natural talents and what they want to do. You may have a guy that's excellent on a bike, but he's horrible behind a football or volleyball or behind a cricket bat or on the squash court or whatever the case is. But he has a talent that we don't have the facilities or the avenue for him to explore. So what he's going to do? Let me sit down and let me the really enough for you to do, because there's no avenue for him to explore his talents, And I think that if we're going to address a number of I'm taking it now from the institutional back to the communities and the blocks, because I think we really got to look at men from that perspective. If we can find an avenue where these men can put their energy into something positive, considered as a sport internationally, I think that we would have a lot more situations for Roy to deal with, at the community level. Yeah, these youngsters will be a lot more positive every day. We gotta clean somebody's yard and help give back to society in some way, because they're now thinking in a positive way, and they use the sports now to have some personal development sessions. You don't just only ride or play with a ball, but you hit the classroom, you hit the.
I want to be a little bit of a devil's advocate there, not to cut you, because
no problem.
That institutions, well, let me look at sport, and as I play devil's advocate here, competition is the main focus of the game when it comes to sporting organizations, or the case would be. There's so much going on, they're busy. Do you think it's really enough? They have enough time to really invest in this whole personal development, or should it be a priority for them?
It must be a priority. Look at the prison. I mean, you can't want more. You can't need more justification. Look at nearly 1,000 men in prison to compare 30 women, or just about. You want more justification? You want to look? you want to look at the court? You really want to open the paper and see the court section? I mean, we have to be realistic about this whole situation. And see it for what it really is. It's not a matter of if we have the time. People make time for what they see as important. And when we start prioritizing the needs of young people, the needs of men, and really hitting that men at the core of the needs. Okay, the needs. Once we start addressing those at a national level, I am telling you, a lot of the money that they spend feeding them up at prison, that money can be invested into some productive community programs or into some structure programs for these young people to really excel in and to put that energy in. So yeah, people make time and they make money for what they see as important.
Okay, I'm glad you touched on that point, and it's certainly some very good takeaway and food for thought. Certainly, you know, as we continue to plan and to see how we can continue to develop our men and boys in our society. So one last question, because we're almost out of time, and I just want to touch on quickly on the whole idea of social media. I know that Sean briefly touched on it, but social media has taken over, you know, our lives. The phones and those services have taken over our lives. What sort of impact? And then there's always the school of thought or the train of thought where, you know, that has also caused persons to not be involved much in sport as well, because we spend so much of our time on our devices and stuff like that, and our, you know, our games, our electronic devices. You know, what are some of the things that we can do to help create that balance? Because we see the value of social media, but how can we create that balance so that, you know, one does not outweigh the other? I'm going to get Sean here and then Roy as well, and then we're gonna kind of wrap up as well because we're running out of time.
Okay, well, with respect to social media, one of the things I do with my own students is I say, look, I don't mind if you're coming to the session and you're on your phone or iPad or whatever, but when you get to that 10-minute mark before the session, I need you to disconnect. I need you not to worry about what somebody's posting on Instagram or what somebody sent you on Snapchat, because I need you to get mentally ready for what the session is going to be doing, what we're going to be doing in the session, right? And you know, it's such a challenge for them. Sometimes they'll be like, "But I just need to do one more," and I'm like, "No, you need to just disconnect. When we are finished, that same post is going to be there. You're not going to miss anything." And you know, they just need to understand that life, because life is so instantaneous. No, if something happens, you get access to it. And I just say to them, you know, like, it's not going anywhere. You're not missing anything. And you know, it's I actually have one young boy. He's starting to understand that, and he's starting to slowly, sometimes even go a whole day without using his phone. And I was so surprised. I said to him, well, you know, I messaged you the other day and you didn't respond. He was like, "Oh, Uncle Sean, I didn't charge my phone since yesterday and it died." And I was like, "Oh?" He was like, "Yeah, you know, I just put it down and I don't even think about it sometimes." And I was quite surprised about that, you know. So it's quite a challenge, I could tell you, as being a coach and dealing with young people. Even myself, sometimes I'm on my phone quite a bit, dealing with clients and responding to clients, and also planning out a day. And then you might just tap into Instagram and say, "Well, let me see what's going on here. Let me check something in sports news because a tournament may be on." And next thing you know, you've been on your phone for the last hour, and then it's like, "Oh shoot, I gotta go and do something." So that's just my piece.
That's true. Okay, I'm terribly sorry, but we have to begin to wrap up the conversation. I mean, it's been a very exciting, and we've touched on quite a bit of topics where I think we're very insightful in terms of how we value sport, the development of our men and our boys. So I just want to get everybody to give me a bit of a, you know, closing remarks. I know Fabian and Roy, you're involved with programs. Maybe in your closing remarks, if there's anything that you could point us, point men and boys in the direction of your programs, and that we can do, it'd be certainly very helpful. So I'm going to get Darren and just go around again to get everybody giving their closing points on our topic, the role of sport helping to preserve the mind, body, and will of men, and let's wrap up a very insightful and engaging discussion. So Darren.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I strongly believe that sport plays a very important role in preserving the mind, body, and will. I think, you know, that's something everybody needs to try to, you know, put into their life, some aspect of sport or physical activity, I think the benefits have proven to outweigh, any negative, if there is any at all. So from that point of view, I mean, and the great thing about Barbados is it's such a sporting community. Like, sport is so embraced by everybody, that, it's really just giving the opportunities there, to the people that want it, and just making sure they know how to access the sport. And there's so many sports on offer in Barbados. I mean, just look through the BOA in terms of all the different federations, and there's even more through National Sports Council. So just knowing how to contact someone in a particular sport to try it. I really believe, from an early age, try as many sports as you want. Like, I grew up playing many sports. I grew up in Canada, so I played ice hockey, I played soccer, football, tennis, basketball. I tried every sport there is, and I love sport. I mean, I came to Barbados, I discovered triathlon, surfing, sports that are unique to Barbados. I even tried playing cricket. I mean, I thought it was a blast. I had so much fun, right? And I'm not a good cricket player by any means, but I mean, I enjoyed picking up the bat and and the challenge of it, So, just enjoy sport and have fun with it. It's not always about having to be some elite athlete or aspiring to be the best in it, but you never know until you try it. So you might as well try it, and if it's not for you, try another sport. I mean, there's no rule against how many sports you can play, right? So, and I think the benefits are just great for kids.
Awesome.
Keeping them out of trouble and keeping their mind sharp.
Engaged. Awesome. Thank you. Yep. Over to you, Fabian. Your closing points, and as I say, you can certainly let us know what type of programming is out there available as well within your space as well.
Well, yes. I just want to close by saying I want you guys, along with all the men listening to this, to celebrate self. I know it is International Men's Day, and the focus is on bettering health for men and boys. But I think oftentimes we don't really celebrate ourselves enough. So yeah, just make sure we celebrate ourselves. Yes, I am within the Ministry of Youth. And the Ministry of Youth have tremendous programs for young people. It is located right there in Sky Mall, just behind Burger King. There's a double door. You go up and there's an application form. You can speak to any one of the officers, and there are a lot of different programs there for young people. And even where I am at the Barbados Youth Advanced Score, you can collect forms from our office in Warrens, which is through the Gateway Warner Card Plaza. You follow the road, the second last building on your right. There's a big sign outside, So there are opportunities, and I would encourage young people to get involved in sport. It is a good avenue to let go of, to do with your own self. Get those emotions. As I said, as I try to stress the whole emotional well-being of men, particularly, that is an ideal way. Sports is an ideal place where those emotions come out, and you have to find ways to cope and deal with them. And that is something that can help men transcend or even apply to their entire life as parents, as spouses, as husbands, in the workplace. All of these are skills that they can use throughout their entire life. So get involved in sport. There's a lot available. There's no excuse not to be involved.
Awesome. Great words of advice. Roy?
Yes, for me, I would like to continue to encourage and support those persons who play active role in terms of, the sports that they teach young kids, especially in the school system. And one of the things, you should do is try to create, incentives, because, persons want to know, after doing all this, what am I going to gain from this? I think once you create some very useful incentives, you have like things like scholarships and stuff, especially for those persons who like, secondary school and UA and so forth, tertiary education institutions will provide those things. So creating incentives that will help to encourage persons to, take part in sports, as I think Fabian was saying, to those sports that you don't normally see persons taking part of, encouraging those as well, and giving opportunities to all that they can play in their unique environment that they feel comfortable playing. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Roy. And Sean, 30 seconds.
No problem. Yeah, just want to put a plug here. Anybody that's interested in sport, squash is a great sport to get introduced to.
Hey.
it is a game of physical chess. You know, it really takes a toll on you mentally, physically, and I would say from my personal experience, it's helped me tremendously as an individual. Playing volleyball and then having to switch over to squash, two completely different setups. One's individual, one's a team sport, but having that comparison and knowing, okay, look, as much as I want to do everything by myself and ball I can't, and you have teammates, and you have to be able to say, look, I have to trust my teammates. But then when it comes over to squash, there's nobody else but you. And you know, those kind of things, the challenges we go through in sport, and as I mentioned, growing up as a young man and having the different distractions and knowing how to stay focused, knowing how to prioritize your areas of strength, and just keeping a good fight on, and having a good support unit. As I said, that is instrumental for most persons. It may not be your family, it may be your friends, it may be your loved ones if you get into an intimate relationship. And just having everything, or having somebody there that can support you is very, very important.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. An excellent plug. And certainly with that being said, we know that sport or physical activity are crucial for one's development and well-being, whether it's organized by a school, a club, as you mentioned tonight, or by friends, or, you know, whatever, by communities. It offers countless physical, social, and emotional growth opportunities. So we want to continue to encourage our men or boys to be involved in sport, as was mentioned tonight. I also want to say a very special thank you to our panelists. Thank you guys for your varying perspectives, for helping to present a very stimulating discussion on the role of sport and how it's certainly helping to preserve the mind and the will and body of our men, our boys in society, the value role models. I also want to thank the Sport for All Commission. I want to thank Kendi from behind the scenes who worked to pull this all together. She's done an amazing job. And thank you too to our viewers, for those who joined us via Facebook and via this webinar. Thank you all for being with us and do all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Have a good evening.
Yes, thank you all.